Chapter 1. The Invitation to Venice. The February morning in London was particularly disagreeable, with a persistent drizzle that seemed determined to penetrate even the most robust umbrella. Hercule Poirot sat in his meticulously ordered flat at Whitehaven Mansions, regarding with satisfaction the perfect symmetry of his breakfast table. The eggs were precisely 3½ minutes boiled, the toast cut into exact triangles, and his tisane steamed at the optimal temperature. "Ah, mon ami Hastings," he said as his friend entered the room, shaking droplets from his coat. "You arrive at the perfect moment. George has prepared enough breakfast for two." "Good of you, Poirot," Captain Hastings replied, settling into the chair opposite. "Beastly weather out there. Makes one long for warmer climes." "Perhaps," said Poirot, delicately patching his moustache with his napkin, "your wish is about to be granted." He produced an envelope of the finest cream-coloured paper, addressed in an elegant hand. The wax seal bore an intricate coat of arms. "This arrived this morning by special messenger," Poirot explained. "The seal belongs to the Morosini family of Venice, one of the oldest patrician families of the Republic." Hastings leaned forward with interest as Poirot carefully opened the letter with his paper knife. "My dear Monsieur Poirot," he read aloud, "your reputation as the world's greatest detective has reached even our ancient city. I write to you on a matter of the utmost delicacy and importance. My husband, Count Alessandro Morosini, will be hosting our annual Carnival Masquerade Ball at the Palazzo Morosini on the 15th of February. This year marks the 500th anniversary of our family's residence in the Palazzo, and we expect guests from across Europe. However, I have reason to believe that someone intends to use this occasion for a terrible purpose. I have received certain warnings that I dare not ignore. I cannot trust the local authorities, as I suspect the threat comes from within our own circle. I implore you to attend as our honored guest. Come in costume, as befits the season, and none need know your true purpose. I will explain everything upon your arrival. Time is of the essence. Your devoted admirer, Contessa Lucia Morosini." Poirot set down the letter and touched his moustache thoughtfully. "Well," asked Hastings eagerly, "will you go? Consider, mon ami, a 500-year-old palazzo, a masquerade ball during Carnival, mysterious warnings, and a lady in distress. How could Hercule Poirot resist such a combination?" "It could be dangerous," Hastings warned, "if someone is planning something terrible." "Précisément. That is why Poirot must go. Evil must not be allowed to hide behind a mask, whether literal or metaphorical." He stood straightening his waistcoat. "George, prepare my travelling cases. We leave for Venice immediately." "We?" Hastings brightened. "But of course, I shall require my faithful Watson. Besides, you wished for warmer climes, did you not?" As George bustled about making preparations, Poirot studied the letter once more. Something in the Contessa's phrasing troubled him. "From within our own circle." In his experience, the most dangerous threats often came from those we trust most. "I say, Poirot," Hastings mused, "what sort of costume will you wear to a Venetian masquerade?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Something appropriate to the occasion, mon ami. After all, at a masquerade, everyone hides their true face. It will be most instructive to see what people choose to reveal when they believe themselves concealed." The rain continued to beat against the windows, but already Poirot's mind was in Venice, among the canals and bridges, where death might wear a carnival mask and strike at midnight. He had solved many mysteries, but something told him this would be unlike any case he had encountered before. "One thing puzzles me," Hastings said, studying the envelope. "How did the Contessa know to send the letter to arrive today?" "The ball is on the 15th. That gives us barely a week to reach Venice." Poirot smiled. "Ah, Hastings, already you begin to think like a detective. Yes, the timing is most particular. Either the Contessa has planned this invitation for some time, or the threat she mentions has recently become urgent. In either case, we must not delay." As if to emphasize his words, the clock on the mantelpiece chimed 9 times somewhere in Venice. In a palazzo that had stood for half a millennium, someone was planning murder. And Hercule Poirot, the little Belgian with the egg-shaped head and the magnificent moustaches, would be there to stop them. Or so he hoped. "Hey, detective, quick question. Where in the world are you solving mysteries from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you want more twisted tales, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's case, it gets even creepier. Stay sharp." Chapter 2. The Palazzo Morosini. The journey to Venice had been swift but comfortable, the Orient Express carrying Poirot and Hastings through a Europe still bearing the scars of the Great War. As their gondola glided through the narrow canals in the late afternoon of February 14th, Poirot observed the city with his keen grey eyes. Venice during Carnival was a riot of colour and mystery. Figures in elaborate costumes and masks hurried along the walkways, their laughter echoing off ancient stones. "Ecco, signori," announced their gondolier, gesturing ahead. "Palazzo Morosini." The palazzo rose from the waters of the Grand Canal, like a vision from another age. Its Byzantine Gothic facade was adorned with delicate arches and ornate balconies, the setting sun turning its pink marble walls to gold. Servants in livery waited at the water entrance to help them disembark. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings." A woman descended the marble steps, her hands extended in greeting. The Contessa Lucia Morosini was perhaps 45, with dark hair elegantly arranged and intelligent brown eyes that held a shadow of worry. "How good of you to come so quickly." "Madame la Contessa," Poirot bowed over her hand. "Your letter suggested urgency." "Indeed." She glanced around nervously. "But come, you must be tired from your journey. Marco will show you to your rooms. We dine at 8, and I will explain everything then." As they followed the elderly butler through corridors lined with Renaissance paintings and Murano glass chandeliers, Hastings whispered, "I say, Poirot, did you notice how she looked about, as if she feared being overheard?" "I noticed many things, mon ami," Poirot replied quietly, "including the fact that despite her welcome, the Contessa wears mourning jewelry, jet beads that suggest a recent loss." Their rooms were magnificent, overlooking the Grand Canal. Poirot had barely time to approve the perfect symmetry of his chamber when a knock came at the door. Entree. A young man entered, perhaps 25, with the dark good looks common to the Veneto region, though his eyes were a startling blue. "Monsieur Poirot, I am Roberto Benedetti, the Count's secretary. The Contessa thought you might wish to meet some of the house guests before dinner." "Most thoughtful," Poirot murmured, studying the young man. "Tell me, Monsieur Benedetti, how long have you been with the family?" 3 years, monsieur. The Count has been very kind to me." Something flickered in those blue eyes. Was it devotion or something else? In the grand salon, Poirot and Hastings were introduced to the assembled company. Count Alessandro Morosini was a distinguished man of 60, with silver hair and the bearing of old nobility, though Poirot noticed his hands trembled slightly as he poured aperitifs. "May I present my nephew Vincenzo?" the Count said, indicating a sullen young man who barely acknowledged the introduction. "And our dear friends, Sir Reginald Worthington from your own London, the German industrialist Herr Friedrich Kleist, and the American actress Miss Dolores Devine." Miss Devine, a platinum blonde who seemed to glitter with diamonds, extended her hand dramatically. "Charmed, I'm sure. Though what brings the famous Hercule Poirot to our little gathering?" "The Countess's kind invitation, mademoiselle. I have always wished to experience Carnival in Venice." "How delightful!" drawled Sir Reginald, a florid man of 50, "though one hopes this year's festivities won't be as eventful as last year's." A sudden silence fell over the room. The Count's face darkened, and the Contessa touched her mourning jewellery unconsciously. "That was a tragedy," the Count said stiffly. "My brother Giacomo's death was an accident." "Of course," Sir Reginald replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Falling from a balcony during the masquerade. Most unfortunate." Herr Kleist, a precise man with steel-rimmed spectacles, changed the subject. "I understand tomorrow's ball will be magnificent, Count. The 500th anniversary, a sheer momentous occasion." "Indeed," the Count replied, seeming to recover his composure. "The Doge himself once danced in our ballroom. Tomorrow history lives again." As the dinner gong sounded, Poirot filed away his observations. "A death last year, ruled an accident but clearly suspected to be otherwise. A nervous Contessa, a trembling Count, a sullen nephew, and house guests who seemed to know more than they said. And young Roberto Benedetti, whose devotion to his employer might hide other emotions." "Hastings," he murmured as they proceeded to dinner, "I believe we have arrived just in time. The stage is set, the players are assembled, and unless Hercule Poirot is very much mistaken, someone in this palazzo intends to ensure that tomorrow's masquerade becomes a dance of death." The Contessa, overhearing, turned pale. "Then you understand why I wrote to you, Monsieur Poirot. I fear history is about to repeat itself, but this time it will be murder, not an accident, and I believe I know who the victim will be." "Who, madame?" She glanced at her husband, who was engaged in conversation with Miss Devine, and whispered, "My husband, Count Alessandro. Someone intends to kill him tomorrow night, under cover of the masquerade. And I fear that someone is in this very room." Chapter 3. Behind the Masks. The morning of February 15th dawned crisp and clear, with pale sunlight dancing on the canal waters. Poirot rose early, as was his custom, and found the palazzo already bustling with preparations for the evening's masquerade. Servants hurried through the corridors carrying elaborate floral arrangements, while musicians tuned their instruments in the ballroom. After his morning tisane, Poirot sought out the Contessa in her private study, a charming room overlooking a small interior garden. "Madame," he began, settling into a velvet chair, "last evening you expressed fears for your husband's life. The time has come for complete frankness. What makes you believe he is in danger?" The Contessa moved to a writing desk and withdrew a small key. "3 weeks ago, I found this pushed under our bedroom door." She handed him a piece of expensive paper. Poirot read aloud, "The sins of the past demand payment. At the 500th celebration, all debts will be settled. The Count will join his brother in death." "Anonymous, naturally," Poirot observed, examining the paper and handwriting. "Tell me about your brother-in-law's death." "Giacomo was Alessandro's younger brother, charming but reckless. He had indiscretions, gambling debts, affairs." She paused delicately. "Last year, during the masquerade, He was found in the courtyard below the ballroom balcony. His neck was broken. Who was present that night? Many of the same guests who are here now. Sir Reginald had business dealings with both brothers. Hercule was negotiating to purchase some of our art collection. Miss Devine was involved with Giacomo. Ah, and your nephew, Vincenzo? Her face hardened. Vincenzo is Giacomo's son. He believes he should have inherited more than he did. The bulk of Giacomo's estate went to pay his debts. Most interesting. And the secretary, Roberto Benedetti? Roberto. He's been absolutely devoted to Alessandro. Though she hesitated. Continue, madame. It's probably nothing, but I've noticed Roberto seems unusually interested in our family history. I've found him several times in the library, studying old documents. A knock interrupted them. Roberto himself entered, carrying a silver tray with calling cards. Forgive the intrusion, Contessa. More guests have arrived for tonight's ball. His blue eyes flickered to Poirot. Monsieur, the Count wonders if you would join him in the armory. He thought you might appreciate seeing our collection of historical costumes. Poirot found the Count in a vaulted chamber, filled with centuries of Venetian history. Armor, weapons, and magnificent costumes from the height of the Republic's power. Magnificent, is it not? The Count gestured to a display. That crimson robe belonged to my ancestor, who served as ambassador to Constantinople. Your family's history is indeed illustrious, Poirot observed. Tell me, Count, are you aware of the threats against you? The Count's hands began their telltale trembling. Lucia worries too much. The note was probably someone's idea of a cruel joke. You do not fear for your life? At my age, Monsieur Poirot, one fears very little. But his eyes betrayed him. Though I confess, I have taken precautions. Tonight, I will wear this. He indicated an elaborate golden mask and matching costume. Only Lucia will know which masked figure I am. A wise precaution, and your brother's death last year. The Count's face darkened. Giacomo brought his fate upon himself. He was blackmailing someone, I'm certain of it. He hinted as much when he was drunk. Said he'd discovered something that would make him rich. Did he indicate whom? Number, but the night he died he was triumphant. Said by morning he'd have everything he deserved. The Count laughed bitterly. In a way, I suppose he did. That afternoon, Poirot made a systematic tour of the palazzo. In the library, he discovered Roberto Benedetti exactly as the Contessa had described, poring over aged documents. Research, monsieur? Poirot inquired mildly. Roberto started, then smiled. The Morosini history fascinates me. Such secrets these old walls must hold. Indeed. What sort of secrets, I wonder? Oh, the usual. Hidden treasures, lost loves, ancient betrayals. Every great family has its shadows. In the ballroom, Poirot found Miss Dolores Devine supervising the placement of her costume. The American actress was in high spirits, though Poirot detected a brittle quality to her laughter. Poor Giacomo, she sighed when Poirot delicately raised the subject. He was a fool, but a charming one. Did you know he proposed to me the night he died? Said he'd come into money, and we could run away together. You refused? Darling, I've been proposed to by better men than Giacomo Morosini. Besides, I knew his promises were worthless. He lived on dreams and schemes. As evening approached, Poirot encountered Vincenzo on the balcony overlooking the courtyard, the very spot from which his father had fallen. They say he was drunk, Vincenzo said without preamble. But my father could hold his liquor better than any man in Venice. Someone pushed him. You have proof? I have instinct, and tonight. He turned to face Poirot. his dark eyes burning. "Tonight, I think the murderer will strike again, only this time I'll be watching." As Poirot returned to his room to prepare for the masquerade, Hastings met him in the corridor. "I say, Poirot, the servants are all whispering. They say the ghost of Giacomo Morosini walks on the anniversary of his death." "Ghosts, mon ami, are usually very much alive. But you raise an interesting point. On this night of masks and mysteries, who can say what form death might take?" As darkness fell over Venice and the first costumed guests began to arrive, Poirot adjusted his own mask, a simple black domino that left his distinctive moustaches visible. Somewhere in the palazzo, a killer waited behind their own mask, ready to strike. The dance of death was about to begin. Chapter 4. Death at Midnight. The ballroom of the Palazzo Morosini had been transformed into a vision of Venice's golden age. Hundreds of candles flickered in crystal chandeliers, their light reflecting off mirrors and gilt surfaces to create an ethereal glow. Costumed figures whirled across the polished floor to the strains of a hidden orchestra, their masks glittering with jewels and feathers. Poirot, in his modest black domino and evening dress, stood near a marble column, observing the swirling pageant. Hastings, sporting a rather dashing cavalier costume, appeared at his elbow. "I say, Poirot, how are we supposed to protect the Count when everyone looks alike? There must be 36 men in golden masks." "Precisely the problem, mon ami. But observe, the Count's costume has a distinctive scarlet sash. The Contessa pointed it out to me. There, by the windows." Indeed, a figure in golden mask and scarlet sash stood surrounded by guests, playing the perfect host. The Contessa, resplendent as Cleopatra, remained close to her husband's side. "Most of our suspects are easy to identify," Poirot continued. "Miss Devine, for instance. One could hardly mistake her. The actress had come as Venus, in a costume that left little to imagination and everything to admiration. She was holding court near the champagne fountain, her laughter carrying across the room. Sir Reginald has chosen to be Henry VIII, most appropriate for his figure. Hercule, naturally, is a Teutonic knight. Young Vincenzo broods in the corner as Hamlet, again most fitting. And Roberto? Ah, the secretary has shown imagination. He wears the costume of a plague. Doctor, the long-beaked mask is most sinister. He has not left the Count's vicinity all evening." As midnight approached, the revelry reached its peak. Poirot noticed several things simultaneously. Vincenzo had disappeared from his corner. Sir Reginald was arguing heatedly with Hercule near the terrace doors. And Miss Devine had detached herself from her admirers to approach the Count. "Alessandro, darling," her voice carried clearly, "you simply must show me the view from the balcony. The moon over the Grand Canal must be divine." The Count gallantly offered his arm. As they moved toward the balcony doors, the same balcony from which Giacomo had fallen, Poirot felt a prickle of unease. "Hastings," he murmured, "follow them." Discreetly. But at that moment the orchestra ceased playing. A figure in a black cloak and death's head mask had appeared on the musicians' platform, raising a staff for attention. "Lords and ladies," the figure intoned in a disguised voice, "midnight approaches. Time for the unmasking." The crowd pressed forward excitedly. In the confusion, Poirot lost sight of the Count and Miss Devine. He pushed through the throng, his sense of urgency growing. The clock began to chime midnight. 1, 2, 3. A woman's scream pierced the air, high and terrible. The crowd parted like a tide. There, in the center of the ballroom floor, lay a figure in a golden mask and scarlet sash. The Count's body was contorted in agony, his hands clutched to his throat. "Alessandro!" The Contessa rushed forward, tearing off her Cleopatra headdress. "My God, what's happened?" Poirot was already kneeling beside the body. One look at the protruding tongue and bulging eyes behind the mask told him everything. He delicately sniffed near the Count's lips and detected a faint bitter almond scent. "Do not touch him," Poirot commanded as others pressed close. "Captain Hastings, guard the body. Let no one leave this room." "But surely we should call for a doctor," Sir Reginald blustered. "A doctor can do nothing for the Count now. He has been poisoned, cyanide, unless I am mistaken." Gasps and cries arose from the assembled guests. The Contessa swayed and would have fallen if Roberto had not caught her. The secretary's plague doctor mask had been pushed back, revealing a face white with shock. "But how?" Herr Kleist demanded. "We all saw him. He was dancing, talking perfectly well, until midnight," Poirot said grimly. He noticed something glinting on the floor near the body, a champagne glass, its contents spilled across the marble. "This glass? Who gave it to the Count?" "I did." Miss Devine stepped forward, her face pale beneath her elaborate makeup. "But I swear, I took it from the fountain just like everyone else. We toasted midnight together." "Where? Show me exactly." She led them to the champagne fountain. "Here, I took 2 glasses from this side. Alessandro was telling me about it." She stopped, her eyes widening. "Wait, that's not Alessandro." With dramatic suddenness, she pulled the mask from the dead man's face. She pulled the mask from the dead man's face. The assembled company gasped. It was not Count Alessandro who lay dead on the ballroom floor. It was Vincenzo Morosini, his young face frozen in its final agony. "But this is impossible," the Contessa cried. "The costume, the mask, they're Alessandro's." "Where is the Count?" Roberto demanded, looking around wildly. "If Vincenzo was wearing his costume, then where?" A low moan came from the terrace. Hastings rushed to the doors and flung them open. There, slumped against the balustrade in Hamlet's black doublet, was Count Alessandro, blood seeping from a wound on his temple. "Thank God!" the Contessa ran to him. "He's alive!" As the Count was helped inside, Poirot stood very still, his little grey cells working furiously. A substitution, a poisoning, an assault. This was no simple murder. This was a carefully orchestrated performance, and somewhere among the masked figures, the true killer watched and waited. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced, his voice cutting through the chaos, "I must ask you all to remove your masks. The masquerade is over. Now begins the hunt for a very clever murderer, one who killed the wrong man, or perhaps the right one after all." In the silence that followed, the clock finished its 12 strokes, and somewhere in the palazzo, a door closed softly, as if someone had just slipped away into the Venice night. Chapter 5. The Sealed Room. Dawn was breaking over Venice as Poirot finished his preliminary examination of the ballroom. The local police, summoned in the dark hours after midnight, had cordoned off the scene and removed poor Vincenzo's body. The remaining guests, exhausted and shaken, had been questioned and sent to their rooms with strict instructions not to leave the palazzo. Count Alessandro, recovered from his assault but still weak, sat in his study with Poirot, Hastings, and the Contessa. A bandage covered the wound on his temple. "Tell me exactly what happened," Poirot requested, his notebook ready. The Count touched his bandage gingerly. "It was perhaps an hour before midnight. Vincenzo approached me in the card room. He seemed agitated, insisted we speak privately. He said he'd discovered who killed his father. He knew. So he claimed. He wanted to borrow my costume. Said the killer would only reveal themselves to me, that I was the intended victim. I thought it was dramatics, but he was so insistent. So you exchanged costumes? Yes. He put on my golden mask and scarlet sash. I took his Hamlet costume. We agreed to meet on the terrace at midnight. But as I waited there, someone struck me from behind. The next thing I knew, Hastings was reviving me. Poirot turned to the Contessa. You did not know of this exchange? No. If I had, I would never have permitted it. Poor Vincenzo. He was difficult, yes, but he was family. Most interesting, Poirot murmured. Now, I must examine Vincenzo's room. Vincenzo's chamber was on the 3rd floor, overlooking the interior courtyard. Poirot entered with his usual methodical care, observing every detail. The room was in disorder, clothes strewn about, papers scattered on the desk. Either Vincenzo was remarkably untidy, Hastings observed, or someone had searched this room. The latter, mon ami, see, the wardrobe doors are ajar, the mattress slightly askew. Someone looked for something. The question is, did they find it? Poirot began his own search, his small hands moving with practised efficiency. In the wastebasket, he found torn pieces of a letter. Patiently, he assembled them on the desk. Aha! Listen to this, Hastings. Meet me in the library at 11. Come alone. I have proof about your father's death. Someone in this house is not who they claim to be. Good Lord, who wrote it? Unfortunately, the signature is torn away. But see the paper, the same expensive stock as the threatening note to the Count. A knock interrupted them. Roberto Benedetti entered, still pale from the night's events. Monsieur Poirot, I thought you should know. I've discovered something strange. The door to the archive room in the basement is locked from the inside. It's never locked, and no one responds to my knocking. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Show me immediately. The archive room was in the oldest part of the palazzo, down a narrow stone staircase. The heavy oak door was indeed locked, with no sound from within. Who has keys? Poirot demanded. Only myself and the Count, Roberto replied. But my key doesn't work. There must be a key on the inside. Then we must break down the door, quickly. It took 3 servants with a heavy beam to break the ancient block. The door swung open to reveal a windowless chamber, lined with shelves of old documents and ledgers. In the centre of the room, slumped over a reading table, was Sir Reginald Worthington. Hastings rushed forward. He's unconscious, but breathing, thank God. Poirot examined the scene carefully. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the table, along with several open ledgers. The key to the door lay on the floor near Sir Reginald's chair. Drugged, not poisoned, Poirot diagnosed, sniffing the wine-glass. Laudanum, I believe. But observe, Hastings, how did he lock the door from inside and then drop the key out of reach? It is impossible. Unless someone else locked it and slipped the key under the door, Hastings suggested. Precisely. But why? What was Sir Reginald doing here? Roberto had moved to examine the ledgers. These are from 1920 to 1924, the years just before and after Giacomo's death. They record the family's business transactions. As servants carried the unconscious Sir Reginald to a bedroom, Poirot studied the ledgers. His face grew grave. Most illuminating. See here. Large sums of money transferred to a company called Adriatic Imports, and the signature authorizing these transfers. Giacomo Morosini. Hastings read. But what does it mean? I begin to see a pattern, Poirot said slowly. Vincenzo discovered something about his father's death, and was killed for it. Sir Reginald, searching for the same information, was drugged and sealed in this room. Why not kill him too? Perhaps the murderer was interrupted. Or perhaps, Poirot suggested, Sir Reginald was not meant to die, merely to be found in compromising circumstances. Come, we must question the others. In the morning room, they found Hercule taking coffee with Miss Devine. Both looked haggard. "This is intolerable," Clyce declared. "First Vincenzo, now Sir Reginald. Are we all to be picked off one by one?" "Tell me," Poirot said, "what was your business with the Morosini family?" Clyce adjusted his spectacles nervously. "I represent a consortium interested in purchasing certain artworks. The Morosinis have a Titian that my clients desire." "And Sir Reginald?" "He claimed to represent British interests in Adriatic shipping. But between us, monsieur, I suspected he was really here about those old embezzlement rumors." Miss Devine laughed bitterly. "Embezzlement? Is that what they're calling it now? Giacomo was a thief, plain and simple. He stole from his own family to pay his debts." "You seem very certain, mademoiselle." "You seem very certain, mademoiselle. He told me himself the night he died. Said he'd found a way to make his fortune. Threatened to expose someone's secrets unless they paid." She shuddered. "I told him he was a fool to try blackmail. I was right." Poirot stood, his face thoughtful. "The pieces begin to fit together. A sealed room that isn't sealed. A murder victim who wasn't the intended target, and secrets that stretch back years. But we still lack the most important piece, the identity of our killer." "What do we do now?" Hastings asked. "Now, mon ami, we wait for Sir Reginald to wake, and we set a trap. Tonight there will be another gathering, not a masquerade, but a revelation. The murderer has made one crucial mistake, and Hercule Poirot will expose it." As they left the archive room, Poirot noticed something glinting in a corner, a small button, torn from a garment. He picked it up discreetly, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Yes," he murmured to himself, "the murderer has indeed made a mistake, and this little button will help hang them." Chapter 6. Secrets of the Gondoliers. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the canals as Poirot made his way to the Palazzo's private dock. He had sent Hastings to watch over the recovering Sir Reginald, while he pursued a different line of inquiry. The Morosini gondoliers, he reasoned, saw everything that happened on the water, and perhaps more besides. He found 3 gondoliers maintaining their craft: old Giuseppe, who had served the family for 40 years, and 2 younger men, Marco and Stefano. "Signori," Poirot began in careful Italian, "I need your help to understand the movements on the night Signor Giacomo died." Giuseppe spat into the water. "That one?" He brought shame to the family name. Always sneaking about at night, meeting people in shadows. What sort of people? Foreigners mostly, men who came by private gondola, faces hidden. Sometimes they'd argue. We could hear voices carrying over the water. The night he died, did you see anything unusual? Marco, a handsome youth with keen eyes, stepped forward. "I was on duty that night. Signor Giacomo ordered me to prepare a gondola just before the masquerade. Said he had important business after midnight. But he never came for it. No, signore, but someone else did." Poirot's moustaches quivered with interest. "Who?" "I couldn't see clearly. They wore a mask and cloak. But they took the gondola out for perhaps 20 minutes, then returned it." "What time was this?" "Just after we heard the screaming from the palazzo, when news came that Signor Giacomo had fallen." "Most interesting. Tell me, did any of you ever transport packages for Giacomo?" perhaps to this Adriatic Imports Company. The gondoliers exchanged glances. Finally, Giuseppe spoke. Signor Giacomo sometimes had us deliver sealed packages to a warehouse near the Rialto. Always at night, always secret. Could you take me to this warehouse? Within minutes, Poirot was gliding through the narrow waterways of Venice, Giuseppe expertly navigating the gondola. They passed under ancient bridges and between buildings that seemed to lean together conspiratorially. There, Giuseppe pointed to a dilapidated building with barred windows. But it's been abandoned for over a year, since just after Signor Giacomo died. Poirot studied the building thoughtfully. Wait here, mon grave. The warehouse door was locked, but Poirot noticed fresh scratches on the metal, suggesting recent entry. Through a broken window, he could see an empty interior, except for a desk in one corner with papers scattered across it. Making a mental note to return with the police, Poirot was about to leave when he noticed something peculiar. Caught on a splinter of the window frame was a thread of distinctive blue silk, the same unusual shade as Roberto Benedetti's cravat. Back at the palazzo, Poirot found the household in uproar. Sir Reginald had awakened, but was refusing to speak to anyone except Poirot. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," Sir Reginald said weakly from his bed, "I must tell you, I'm not who I claim to be." "I had surmised as much. You are perhaps an insurance investigator?" Sir Reginald's eyes widened. "How did you—" "Never mind. Yes, Lloyd's of London. The Morosini collection is insured for a fortune, and there have been irregularities. Items reported stolen that we suspect were sold. I came to investigate. And what did you discover in those ledgers?" Giacomo was running a smuggling operation through Adriatic Imports. But here's the crucial thing, he wasn't working alone. Someone in this house was his partner, someone who had access to the family treasures. "Do you know who?" "I was close to the answer when someone drugged my wine. But I remember seeing a name, repeated in several entries, R.B., always authorizing shipments when the Count was away." "R.B.," Poirot mused. "Roberto Benedetti?" "That was my thought. But when I confronted him last night during the masquerade, he seemed genuinely shocked. He said—" Sir Reginald paused, frowning. "He said the real secret was in the Doge's portrait. Then I felt dizzy and had to sit down. The next thing I knew, I was waking up here." Poirot left Sir Reginald to rest and sought out Hastings in the garden. "I say, Poirot, where have you been? The Contessa is beside herself. She's convinced the murderer will strike again. She may be right, mon ami. Tell me, what do you know of the Doge's portrait? The one in the ballroom. Magnificent thing, painted by Titian himself, they say. The Count's ancestor who served as ambassador. Worth a fortune. Indeed, and perhaps worth killing for. Come, Hastings, we must examine this portrait immediately." They found the ballroom being cleaned by servants, the remnants of the fatal masquerade being swept away. The portrait hung in its place of honor, a magnificent rendering of a Venetian nobleman in ceremonial robes. Poirot studied it carefully, then suddenly exclaimed, "Mais oui, Hastings, help me lift it down." "I say, is that wise?" "Necessary, mon ami. See, the frame is newer than the painting, and here at the back, behind the portrait, built into the wall, was a small safe." "Good Lord!" Hastings exclaimed. "A hidden safe." "And recently opened," Poirot observed, noting fresh fingerprints on the metal. "Whatever was hidden here has been removed. The question is, by whom?" A footstep made them turn. Roberto Benedetti stood in the doorway, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot," he said quietly, "I think it's time I told you the truth about who I really am, and why I came to the Palazzo Morosini." Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes, Monsieur Benedetti. I think it is indeed time for the truth. But first, perhaps you can explain why threads from your cravat were found at the abandoned Adriatic Imports warehouse." Roberto's blue eyes widened in shock. "My cravat? But that's impossible. I've never been to any warehouse. He was interrupted by a scream from the upper floors. The Contessa's voice, high and terrified. "Help! The Contessa's voice, high and terrified. "Help! Someone help! There's been another death." As they rushed toward the stairs, Poirot muttered, "The killer grows desperate. But why? What have we disturbed that requires another murder?" The answer, when they reached it, would prove more shocking than any of them could have imagined. Chapter 7. The Doge's Portrait. They found the Contessa standing outside the door to Hercule's room, her hand pressed to her mouth in horror. Through the open doorway, they could see the German industrialist sprawled across his bed, his face an alarming shade of blue. Poirot pushed past the gathering crowd and bent over the still form. After a moment's examination, he straightened. "He lives, but barely. Hastings, send for a doctor immediately. He has been poisoned, but not with cyanide this time. The symptoms suggest digitalis, foxglove." "But how?" the Contessa asked. "He took dinner in his room, but it was from the same kitchen as everyone else." Poirot examined the room methodically. On the bedside table sat a tea service, the cup half empty. He sniffed it delicately. "Not in the tea. Ah, but what is this?" He picked up a small medicine bottle. Hercule's heart medication. Someone has tampered with it, replacing his normal pills with a lethal dose of digitalis. "Who would know about his heart condition?" Hastings asked. "Anyone observant," Roberto said quietly. "He took his pills openly at meals." While the doctor attended to Kleist, Poirot gathered everyone in the study. The Count, still weak from his injury, sat beside his wife. Miss Devine huddled in a corner, for once without her theatrical manner. Sir Reginald, though pale, had insisted on joining them. Roberto stood by the window, his handsome face troubled. "The time has come," Poirot announced, "for complete honesty. Monsieur Benedetti, you are about to tell us who you really are." Roberto took a deep breath. "My real name is Roberto Benedetti Morosini. I am Giacomo's illegitimate son." The Contessa gasped. The Count's face darkened with anger. "Impossible," he declared. "Giacomo had no—" "He had several," Roberto interrupted bitterly. "Children he never acknowledged, scattered across Italy. I came here 3 years ago to claim what was rightfully mine. Not money, but recognition, a name." "You're lying," the Count insisted, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "I have proof. Letters from my mother, documents. They're hidden in my room. I can show you—" "Later," Poirot interjected. "First, explain about the warehouse." "I know nothing of any warehouse." "Yes, I studied the family records, trying to understand my father's business. I discovered the embezzlement, the smuggling, but I swear, I've never been to that warehouse." "Yet threads from your cravat were found there." "Then someone is trying to frame me, just as they framed Sir Reginald in the archive room." Miss Devine suddenly spoke up. "This is madness. We're all turning on each other while the real killer laughs at us. Giacomo, Vincenzo, now Kleist. Who's next?" "An excellent question, mademoiselle," Poirot said. "But I believe the answer lies in that portrait. Count, what can you tell us about the safe behind it?" The Count looked genuinely surprised. "Safe? What safe?" Poirot led them to the ballroom and demonstrated the hidden compartment. The Count stared in amazement. "I never knew. This must have been installed by my father or grandfather. But what was in it?" "That," Poirot said, "is what our killer was seeking. Roberto, you mentioned R.B. in the ledgers. You assumed it meant you were being framed. But what if it stood for something else? Like what? Riccardo Balducci, a weak voice said from the doorway. Herr Kleist, unterstützt vom Arzt, hatte es geschafft, Ihnen beizutreten. That's what I discovered. Riccardo Balducci. He was the real owner of Adriatic Imports. But who is Riccardo Balducci? Hastings asked. A name Giacomo used for his illegal activities, Kleist continued weakly. I found correspondence in the archive before I was drugged. But there was more evidence that someone else used that identity after Giacomo died. Someone who needed to clean up the operation before it was discovered. Who? The Count demanded. Before Kleist could answer, the lights suddenly went out, plunging the ballroom into darkness. There were screams, sounds of struggle, and then a splash from outside. When the servants managed to restore the lights, they found one of the terrace doors open, wet footprints leading from the canal entrance. "Someone's escaped," Sir Reginald exclaimed. But Poirot was examining the floor near the portrait. "No, my friends, someone wants us to think they've escaped. See, these footprints were made deliberately. The water was carried in a bucket. Observe the splash pattern. This is misdirection." "Then where is the killer?" the Contessa asked fearfully. "Still among us," Poirot said grimly, "and growing more desperate. But they have made a fatal error. In trying to incriminate Roberto with planted evidence, they have revealed themselves." He picked up something from the floor, a small key. "This fell during the struggle in the darkness. It is not a palazzo key. See the modern manufacture? I believe this opens a safety deposit box, probably in the Venetian bank, and in that box we will find what was removed from the safe." "But whose key is it?" Hastings asked. "That," Poirot said, "will be revealed when we discover what Vincenzo learned that cost him his life. He said someone in this house was not who they claimed to be. Roberto has revealed his secret. But there is another impostor among us, one whose entire identity is a fabrication." He turned to study each face in turn. "Tomorrow we will visit the banks of Venice, and then, mes amis, Hercule Poirot will reveal the truth about the Morosini murders, all of them." As the group dispersed, Poirot noticed Miss Devine lingering by the portrait, studying it intently. "It reminds you of someone, does it not, mademoiselle?" She started. Yes, the eyes especially. They're very like—" She stopped abruptly. "Like someone you know? Or perhaps someone you knew?" "You're imagining things, Monsieur Poirot," she said, but her voice trembled. "I'm just tired and frightened. We all are." As she hurried away, Poirot stroked his moustaches thoughtfully. The portrait's eyes seemed to follow him. Dark, intelligent eyes that had seen centuries of Morosini secrets. "Soon," he murmured to the painted face, "your secrets will be revealed, and then justice for all the dead, past and present." Chapter 8. Poison in the Prosecco. The morning brought the news that Herr Kleist had stabilized, but remained gravely ill. Poirot, despite the doctor's protests, insisted on questioning him before visiting the Venetian banks. "Tell me about Riccardo Balducci," Poirot requested, sitting beside the sick man's bed. Kleist's voice was barely a whisper. "I found correspondence in archive. Letters signed R.B. but handwriting, different from Giacomo's known writing. Someone else, using that identity." "When did this begin?" "After Giacomo's death. The real Riccardo Balducci was already dead, killed in Rome. 1922. Someone stole his identity to continue the smuggling." "Who knew about Balducci's death?" "Anyone who read Italian newspapers. Small item, back page, man found drowned, in Tiber. Poirot's eyes sharpened. And you discovered who assumed this identity? Bank records showed regular deposits to account of. He struggled to speak. Rest, mon ami. I will discover the truth. At the Banco di Venezia, Poirot presented the mysterious key to the manager, Signor Rossi, who examined it with interest. Ah, yes. Safety deposit box 247. It was opened just yesterday morning by... He checked his records. By Signorina Devine. She presented proper identification and key. What did she remove? I cannot say, but she carried a leather portfolio when she left. Most illuminating. Tell me, how long has she held this box? According to our records, it was opened in 1924 under the name Riccardo Balducci. But Signorina Devine has had signing authority for the past year. Poirot and Hastings exchanged glances. She never mentioned this, Hastings murmured. At the second bank they visited, Banco San Marco, they made an even more startling discovery. The manager, recognizing Poirot's description, confirmed that Miss Devine had recently accessed another box. This one containing documentation proving she was the legal heir to the Riccardo Balducci identity. But how is this possible? Hastings asked as they returned to the Galazzo. Elementary, mon ami. Miss Devine is not who she claims to be. But first, we must understand exactly how the poison was administered. They found Miss Devine in the garden, reading. She looked up as they approached, her face carefully composed. Gentlemen, what a lovely morning! Though I must say this whole affair has quite shattered my nerves. Mademoiselle, Poirot began quietly, yesterday you gave Count Alessandro, who was actually Vincenzo, a glass of champagne. Tell me exactly how you obtained it. From the fountain, as I said. I took 2 glasses from the table beside it. But the champagne fountain was in the center of the ballroom. The only table nearby held the special Prosecco, a limited vintage from the Count's private cellars. Her composure slipped slightly. I may have confused the details. The evening was quite overwhelming. Indeed, but here is what troubles me. The Prosecco was specially imported from a vineyard near Treviso. A vineyard, curiously, that was once owned by Riccardo Balducci. Miss Devine went very still. You see, Poirot continued, I made inquiries this morning. That Prosecco was not served to the general guests. It was reserved for a private toast between you and the Count. A toast that you initiated. I don't know what you're suggesting. I suggest that you pre-poisoned 1 glass with cyanide, knowing exactly when and to whom you would give it. You intended to kill Count Alessandro, not his nephew. This is absurd. Why would I want to kill Alessandro? Because, Poirot said gently, he was the only person who could identify you. You are not Dolores Devine, American actress. You are Lucia Balducci, daughter of Riccardo Balducci and widow of Giacomo Morosini. The woman who had called herself Miss Devine stared at them in shock. Then, slowly, she began to laugh. Clever, Monsieur Poirot, very clever, but not quite right. Then tell me the truth. She stood, her whole demeanor changing. Gone was the theatrical actress. In her place stood a woman of quiet dignity, as barely controlled rage. I am indeed Lucia Balducci, but I was never married to Giacomo Morosini. I was married to the real Riccardo Balducci, until Giacomo had him murdered in Rome. Murdered? Giacomo needed Riccardo's identity for his smuggling operation. When Riccardo refused to cooperate, Giacomo arranged his death and stole his name, his business, everything. I've spent 3 years gathering evidence, 3 years planning my revenge. So, you came here as Miss Devine. To destroy the Morosini family, as they destroyed mine. Giacomo was meant to be first. but someone else pushed him from that balcony before I could act. Then I learned Alessandro knew about the real Riccardo's death. He was going to expose everything to protect the family name. So you decided to kill him. Justice, Monsieur Poirot. Not murder, justice. But you killed an innocent young man instead. For the first time, her composure cracked completely. I didn't know. How could I know they had switched costumes? Vincenzo was just a boy. Tears streamed down her face as the full horror of her mistake struck her. And the attempts on Sir Reginald and Hercule? Sir Reginald was getting too close to the truth about Riccardo. I only meant to drug him, to discredit him. And Kleist, she shuddered. I panicked. I thought he'd discovered my real identity. But he hadn't. He was investigating the smuggling operation, not your identity. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing. I've become the very monster I sought to destroy. Innocent people are dead because of my hatred. As Hastings moved to summon the police, Poirot studied the broken woman with a mixture of pity and sadness. One question remains, madame. If you killed Vincenzo by mistake, who pushed Giacomo from the balcony last year? She looked up through her tears. I thought you'd realized. It was Roberto. Told me himself. He couldn't bear to see his father destroy the family name any longer. He pushed Giacomo during their argument on the balcony. And you said nothing? Why should I? Roberto did what I came here to do. Justice was served, even if by another hand. As the police led her away, Poirot stood in the garden, troubled. One mystery was solved, but another remained. Was Roberto truly a murderer? Or was this yet another deception from a woman who had built her life on lies? The truth he suspected would prove more complex than even Lucia Balducci imagined. Chapter 9. The Blackmailer's Letters. With Lucia Balducci under arrest and taken away by the Venice police, a strange calm settled over the Palazzo Morosini. Poirot, however, remained deeply troubled. Too many pieces of the puzzle still refused to fit properly. I say, Poirot, Hastings observed, as they stood in the now empty ballroom, surely the case is solved. Miss Devine, or rather Mrs. Balducci, has confessed to poisoning Vincenzo. She has confessed to one murder, mon ami. But what of Giacomo's death? And why do I have this persistent feeling that we have been led carefully down a particular path? You think she's lying about Roberto pushing his father? I think, Hastings, that we have been presented with a very convenient solution. But Hercule Poirot does not accept convenient solutions, not when they leave so many questions unanswered. He moved to the hidden safe behind the Doge's portrait, studying it once more. What was taken from here? What was so important that it justified multiple murders? A soft knock interrupted them. Roberto entered, his face haggard. Monsieur Poirot, I must speak with you. About what that woman said, it's not true. I never pushed my father from the balcony. Yet you admit he was your father. Yes, but I loved him, despite his faults. I came here seeking recognition, not revenge. Poirot studied the young man's earnest face. Tell me about the night he died. Everything you remember. Roberto ran his hands through his dark hair. I had arranged to meet him after midnight. He said he had something important to tell me, about my future with the family. But when I went to the balcony, he was already... He shuddered. Already lying in the courtyard below. You saw no one else? There were people moving about, servants cleaning up after the masquerade, but no one on the balcony itself. Yet you said nothing about being his son. I was afraid. I thought if it became known, I would be suspected. I've spent 3 years building trust here, hoping eventually to prove my worth." Poirot nodded slowly. "And the documents you mentioned, proof of your parentage?" "In my room. I can show you." As they climbed to Roberto's chamber, Poirot observed, "You have been studying the family history very thoroughly. What have you learned?" "That my father wasn't the only Morosini with secrets. This family has been hiding things for generations." In Roberto's room, he produced a small wooden box from beneath his mattress. Inside were letters, certificates, and photographs. "Here," he said, handing Poirot a faded photograph, "my mother and father, taken in 1898. Poirot examined the image. A young woman with Roberto's blue eyes is standing beside a man who was unmistakably a younger Giacomo Morosini. "And this birth certificate shows your legitimacy?" "No, it shows my illegitimacy, but also Giacomo's acknowledgment. He did care, Monsieur Poirot. He just couldn't publicly claim me." As Poirot studied the documents, his eye was caught by another letter in the box, newer than the others, written in a different hand. "This is not from your father," he observed. Roberto flushed. "Number that's from Vincenzo. He wrote to me after he discovered who I really was." Poirot read the letter with growing interest. "Roberto, I know who you are. I've known for months. Father wasn't the only one with secrets. Meet me in the library tonight at 11. I have something to show you, something that will change everything about our family's history. We're not the only bastards in the Morosini line." V. "When did you receive this?" "The night of the masquerade. But I never made it to the library. I was helping with preparations until nearly midnight." "Most interesting. Hastings, do you recall? This matches the torn letter we found in Vincenzo's room." "By Jove, you're right." "But if Roberto didn't meet him, who did?" Poirot's little grey cells began working furiously. Someone who knew about this meeting. Someone who had reason to prevent Vincenzo from revealing family secrets. They returned to the library, where Poirot began a methodical search. In a volume of Venetian history, he found a folded paper tucked between the pages. "Aha! Vincenzo's research notes. Listen to this. Giovanni Morosini, 1847 to 1923. Official records show no children, but baptismal records from San Giorgio Maggiore indicate illegitimate daughter born 1872 to English governess Sarah Worthington." Hastings gasped. "Worthington? You don't think that our Sir Reginald might be more closely connected to this family than he admitted? It becomes increasingly likely." They found Sir Reginald in the garden, still pale but determined to be about. At their approach, his face grew wary. "Gentlemen, I trust the matter is concluded with Miss Devine's arrest." "Not quite, Sir Reginald," Poirot said pleasantly. "Or should I say, Cousin Reginald?" The colour drained from Sir Reginald's already pale face. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do. Sarah Worthington was your grandmother, was she not? Which makes you a descendant of the Morosini line, albeit an illegitimate one. Even if that were true, what would it matter?" "It would matter, mon ami, if you came here not as an insurance investigator, but as a relative seeking to claim inheritance. It would matter if Vincenzo had discovered this connection and threatened to expose it." Sir Reginald sat down heavily. "You don't understand. I didn't come here for money." "Then why?" "For justice. My grandmother was ruined by Giovanni Morosini, cast out pregnant and penniless. My family has lived in poverty for generations while the Morosinis lived in luxury. When I learned about the insurance irregularities, I saw a chance to exact revenge through financial ruin, to balance the scales. But then Vincenzo found those baptismal records. He was going to tell his uncle, expose everything. Sir Reginald's hands shook. I couldn't let that happen. Not when I was so close. So you met him in the library instead of Roberto. I tried to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. Said he was tired of family secrets, that everything should be brought into the light. And when he refused to stay silent, Sir Reginald buried his face in his hands. I never meant to hurt him. We struggled, and his head hit the corner of the reading table. When I saw he was unconscious, I put the poison in his wine glass, made it look like suicide. But then he recovered and went to the masquerade, wearing his uncle's costume. So you followed, believing you were killing Count Alessandro. I thought I was preventing him from learning the truth. Instead, ... He looked up with haunted eyes. Instead, I killed an innocent boy who only wanted honesty. As Hastings summoned the police, Poirot reflected on the tragic irony. 2 killers, each believing they were striking at their intended target, each destroying an innocent instead. But something still nagged at him. In a case full of assumed identities and hidden relationships, was even this the complete truth? The answer would come sooner than he expected, and from the most unlikely source of all. Chapter 10. Carnival of Lies. As the second set of police departed with Sir Reginald in custody, Poirot sat in the Palazzo's study, his brow deeply furrowed. The Contessa served him tea with trembling hands, while Count Alessandro paced before the fireplace. 2 confessions to the same murder, Poirot mused aloud. Most irregular. Surely it's clear now, the Count said. That woman, Lucia Balducci, was lying to protect herself. Sir Reginald has told us the truth. Has he? Poirot sipped his tea thoughtfully. Consider the timeline, Count. Sir Reginald claims he poisoned Vincenzo's wine in the library, but Lucia Balducci poisoned the Prosecco at the champagne fountain. 2 different poisons, 2 different locations, same victim. The Contessa looked confused. Then which one really killed him? Ah, madame, that is the question that troubles Hercule Poirot. Because you see, when I examined Vincenzo's body, there was only one poison in his system, cyanide from the Prosecco. The wine Sir Reginald supposedly poisoned was never consumed. Hastings leaned forward. Then Sir Reginald was lying. Partially. I believe he did strike Vincenzo in the library and put poison in his wine. But Vincenzo never drank it. He regained consciousness and went to the masquerade, where Lucia's cyanide completed what Sir Reginald had begun. But why would Sir Reginald confess to a murder he didn't complete? Because, mon ami, he believed he had committed it, just as Lucia believed she had killed Count Alessandro. Both were deceived by the costume exchange. Poirot stood and began to pace. No, there is something else at work here. Someone has orchestrated this carnival of lies, using each person's guilty conscience against them. What do you mean? The Count asked. Consider, Lucia Balducci came here for revenge, but found Giacomo already dead. Sir Reginald came seeking to expose family secrets. Roberto sought recognition as Giacomo's son. Each had motives, each had secrets, each could be manipulated. The Contessa set down her teacup with shaking hands. Alessandro, perhaps we should tell him. Tell me what? Poirot's eyes sharpened. The Count and Contessa exchanged glances. Finally, Alessandro spoke. There was something else in that safe behind the portrait. Something that disappeared before you found it empty. What sort of something? Letters, the Contessa whispered. Blackmail letters that Giacomo had been collecting for years. He was blackmailing half the nobility of Europe. Including members of your own family? Including us, the Count admitted heavily. Giacomo knew about certain irregularities in our marriage certificate. We were never legally wed. Lucia was still married to her first husband when we met. It would have been a scandal that could destroy the family name. Poirot's moustaches twitched. So you paid him to keep silent. For years. Until finally we decided to expose the truth ourselves rather than continue living under his threats. And when did you make this decision? The night of last year's masquerade, the Contessa said quietly. We confronted Giacomo on the balcony, told him we would no longer pay. And his response? He laughed, said he had other sources of income now, that he didn't need our money anymore. He was drunk, boastful. He said. She stopped, her face pale. What did he say, madame? He said he'd found an even better victim, someone with more to lose than mere social disgrace. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Did he name this person number? But he pulled out a letter, waved it at us, said it was worth a fortune. Describe this letter. Expensive paper, with a foreign seal. The handwriting looked official. And then the Count took up the story. Giacomo stumbled backwards, still laughing. We thought he'd regain his balance, but he shuddered. He went over the balustrade. We were too shocked to cry out immediately. So his death was indeed an accident? We thought so. But now, the Contessa looked terrified. Now I wonder if someone else was on that balcony. Someone who took that letter after Giacomo fell. Poirot stroked his moustaches thoughtfully. A most interesting theory. And who had access to the safe behind the portrait? Only family members knew of its existence, the Count said. My father showed it to me when I inherited. I showed Lucia, and I showed Roberto last month when I decided to acknowledge him as family. Ah, Poirot's eyes were very bright now. And these blackmail letters in the safe, they disappeared when we noticed they were gone 3 days ago, just before the masquerade invitations were sent. Most illuminating. Tell me, Count, who suggested inviting Lucia Balducci to the masquerade? Why, Roberto did. He said we needed more female guests to balance the party. And Sir Reginald's invitation? Also Roberto's suggestion. He said the family needed to clear up any insurance irregularities before they became public. Poirot suddenly became very still. Count, may I see the letter your wife sent to me? The one requesting my presence? With growing confusion, the Count went to his desk and withdrew the cream-coloured paper. Poirot studied it carefully, then compared it to one of his own calling cards. Most curious. Contessa, did you write this letter? Of course, you responded to my invitation. I responded to this invitation, yes, but you did not write it. The Contessa stared at him in shock. That's impossible. The handwriting, madame, is excellent, but it is not yours. I have observed your hand in the tea service ledger, in your social correspondence. This letter was written by someone else entirely. But who would? She stopped, understanding dawning in her eyes. Precisely, Poirot said grimly. Someone who wanted the famous Hercule Poirot here as a witness to what was about to unfold. Someone who has been playing a very long game indeed. At that moment, Roberto Benedetti appeared in the doorway, his blue eyes no longer earnest, but cold and calculating. Bravo, Monsieur Poirot, he said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. Though I'm afraid you've discovered the truth rather sooner than I anticipated. In his hand was a small pistol, pointing directly at Poirot's heart. Chapter 11. The Second Death. Roberto, the Contessa gasped. What are you doing? What I've been planning for 3 years, dear aunt. Roberto's voice had lost all trace of its former deference. Though you're not really my aunt, are you? just as I'm not really Giacomo's bastard son." Poirot remained perfectly still, his grey eyes fixed on the young man's face. "The documents you showed us were forgeries. Excellent forgeries, but yes. Roberto Benedetti died in a train accident in Milan 2 years ago. I simply borrowed his identity." "Then who are you?" Roberto smiled coldly. "I am Tommaso Ricci, Riccardo Balducci's business partner, the partner Giacomo Morosini betrayed and left for dead in Rome." "You're Lucia's," Hastings began, "husband, number, but Riccardo was my closest friend. When Giacomo had him murdered, I swore an oath of vengeance. So you came here under false pretenses," the Count said, his face pale. "I came here to destroy the Morosini family as completely as they destroyed Riccardo. But I'm not a crude killer like that amateur Lucia Balducci. I prefer artistry." Poirot spoke quietly. "You orchestrated everything. The invitations, the masquerade, even the murders." "Not quite, Monsieur Poirot. I orchestrated the circumstances. Others provided the actual murders. Beautifully, ironically. Lucia poisoned the wrong man, thinking she was killing Alessandro. Sir Reginald tried to poison Vincenzo, thinking he was preventing exposure. Each destroyed an innocent while believing they were achieving justice. But Giacomo's death, that was your work." Roberto's eyes glittered. "Ah, you want to know about that night? Yes, I was there. I followed him to the balcony after his meeting with Alessandro and Lucia. He was drunk, boastful, waving that letter he'd stolen." "What letter?" "Diplomatic correspondence from the German consulate, revealing secret negotiations that could have toppled governments. Giacomo thought it was just another blackmail opportunity. He had no idea what he really possessed." "So you pushed him?" "I didn't need to. I simply told him who I really was, Riccardo's partner, very much alive and seeking justice." The shock sobered him instantly. He stepped backward in terror and... Roberto shrugged. "Gravity did the rest." "And you took the letter?" "Worth 10 times what Giacomo ever imagined. I've spent the last year selling that information piece by piece to various interested parties. The Morosini fortune is nothing compared to what I've earned." The Contessa found her voice. "But why kill Vincenzo? He was innocent." "Vincenzo was becoming inconvenient. His research into family history was leading him too close to certain truths. Better to let others believe they'd killed him. It simplified matters considerably." "And Herr Kleist?" "Poor Kleist actually was investigating insurance fraud. I couldn't let him discover that several Morosini treasures had been replaced with forgeries I'd arranged during my time here." Poirot shifted slightly, and Roberto raised the pistol. "Please remain still, monsieur. I have great admiration for your methods, but I cannot permit interference now. You invited me here to witness your revenge. I invited you here to legitimize it. When the famous Hercule Poirot concluded that various family members and guests had murdered each other in a web of jealousy and greed, who would question it? Your reputation would ensure my story was believed. But I have not concluded that. No, unfortunately you've proven too astute. Which brings us to an awkward situation." Roberto moved to the window, keeping the gun trained on them. "In approximately 10 minutes, I will discover your bodies, the tragic result of a confrontation between the Count and his wife's supposed lovers. A crime of passion, witnessed by no one. You forget Hastings." "Captain, Hastings will be found in the canal, apparently having jumped from his window in guilt over the affair. Venice is full of tragic love stories." The Count started forward. "You won't?" I will do whatever serves my purpose, Alessandro. Your family destroyed my friend and nearly destroyed me. Now you'll know how it feels to lose everything." Poirot spoke calmly. "But you have made one crucial error, mon ami." "Have I? I can't imagine what." "You have assumed that Hercule Poirot came to Venice alone and unprepared." Poirot smiled slightly. "But I took the precaution of informing Chief Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard about this case, and the Venetian police have been most cooperative." Roberto's confidence flickered. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Then you will not mind the sound of footsteps approaching this very room." Indeed, the sound of heavy boots could be heard in the corridor outside. "You see," Poirot continued conversationally, "when I discovered the safe had been emptied, I arranged for surveillance of certain Venetian banks. Your transactions under various identities have been most illuminating." The door burst open as Venetian carabinieri flooded in, led by a stocky English detective. "Chief Inspector Japp," Hastings exclaimed in relief. "Sorry we're late, Mr. Poirot. Traffic on the canals, you know." Japp grinned as his men disarmed a stunned Roberto. "This the blackmailer, then?" "Among other things," Poirot replied. "Though I suspect when you examine his recent activities, you'll find he's been rather busy selling state secrets as well." As Roberto was led away, he turned back to Poirot with grudging admiration. "How long have you known?" "I suspected from the beginning that our invitation was too convenient. But I became certain when I realized that everyone at the masquerade had been carefully selected, each with a motive, each with secrets that could be manipulated. Only someone with access to Giacomo's blackmail files could have orchestrated such a gathering." "And you let me continue?" "I needed you to reveal the full extent of your crimes. Justice for Riccardo Balducci, perhaps, but justice corrupted by greed and ambition. You became the very thing you sought to destroy." As the palazzo emptied of police and prisoners, Poirot stood on the balcony overlooking the Grand Canal. Venice glittered in the afternoon sun, its eternal beauty unmarked by the human tragedies that had played out within its ancient walls. "Well, Poirot," Hastings said, joining him, "another case closed." "Indeed, mon ami, though it saddens me to see how the pursuit of justice can become the pursuit of vengeance, and how vengeance corrupts even the most justified cause. Still, the truth has come out. Yes, Hastings. In Venice, city of masks and mysteries, truth has finally removed its disguise." But even as he spoke, Poirot knew that some secrets would remain forever hidden in the shadows of the Palazzo Morosini, waiting perhaps for another carnival, the masquerade, to bring them into the light. Chapter 12. The Final Mask. 3 days later, as the last of the police officials departed and the Palazzo Morosini began to return to some semblance of normalcy, Poirot gathered the remaining household in the grand salon. The February afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the ancient tapestries. Count Alessandro sat beside his wife, both looking older than their years. The ordeal had aged them visibly, but there was also a sense of relief, as if a weight they had carried for years had finally been lifted. "Monsieur Poirot," the Contessa said, "I still don't understand everything that happened. So many lies, so many deceptions. How did you see through it all?" Poirot adjusted his tie with characteristic precision. "Madame, it was a case most complex, yes, but also most instructive. You see, from the very beginning, I was troubled by the nature of my invitation." He withdrew the cream-colored letter from his pocket. This invitation was written by someone who knew exactly how to appeal to Hercule Poirot. A lady in distress, a mysterious threat, an ancient palazzo. It was, as you English say, too good to be true. But I did fear for Alessandro's life, the Contessa protested. You did indeed, madam, but you did not write this letter. The person who wrote it had studied your hand carefully, perhaps from household accounts or correspondence. But there were small differences, subtle variations that betrayed the forgery. Hastings leaned forward. But how did you know Roberto was the forger? Several things, mon ami. First, his story of being Giacomo's illegitimate son was almost perfect, except for one detail. The photograph he showed us was indeed genuine, but not of what he claimed. Poirot produced the faded photograph. I had this examined by an expert in Venice. The woman in the image was not Roberto's mother. She was Riccardo Balducci's wife, taken during their honeymoon. Roberto had stolen it from Lucia Balducci's possessions when he searched her rooms. He searched her rooms? The Count asked. But naturally. He needed to know what evidence she possessed, what threats she might pose to his carefully laid plans. You see, Roberto, or rather Tommaso Ricci, had been preparing this elaborate revenge for years. Poirot stood and began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. Consider the timeline. Riccardo Balducci was murdered in Rome in 1922. Tommaso survived but was left for dead. He spent years building a new identity, studying the Morosini family, learning their secrets and weaknesses. But how did he know about the blackmail letters? The Contessa asked. Ah, that was his stroke of genius. He did not know about them initially. He discovered them when he became the family secretary. Giacomo, in his arrogance, allowed Roberto access to many family documents. It must have been quite a revelation to find that cache of blackmail material. So he stole them? Not immediately. First, he studied them, learned who was vulnerable, who could be manipulated. Then he began to plan his masterpiece, a carnival of revenge where the guilty would destroy each other. Poirot moved to stand before the hidden safe. The night Giacomo died, Tommaso followed him to the balcony. But he was not the only one. You were there too, Count, you and your wife. Tommaso heard your confrontation, saw Giacomo's drunken boasting about his new victim. The diplomatic letter, Alessandro said grimly. Precisely. But here is what I believe truly happened. After you left the balcony, Tommaso approached Giacomo. He revealed his true identity, told him about Riccardo's murder. Giacomo, in his shock and terror, stumbled backward, but he did not fall immediately. The Count and Contessa exchanged glances. What do you mean? I mean that Giacomo caught himself on the balustrade. He was hanging there, begging for help, when Tommaso made his choice. He could have saved him. Instead, he pried Giacomo's fingers loose and watched him fall. A horrified silence filled the room. Murder, Hastings whispered. Indeed, but murder disguised as accident, just as everything else in this case was disguised. Tommaso then took the diplomatic letter and began his long campaign of selling its secrets piece by piece. But why bring everyone together for the masquerade? The Contessa asked. Why not simply disappear with his profits? Because, madame, money alone was not enough. Tommaso wanted to destroy the Morosini family completely. Reputation, dignity, everything. He wanted to orchestrate a scenario where family members and guests would murder each other, leaving the Morosini name forever stained with scandal. And he very nearly succeeded, the Count said quietly. Very nearly, yes. But he made several crucial errors. First, he underestimated the guilt and conscience of his chosen instruments. Lucia Balducci was consumed with remorse the moment she realized her mistake. Sir Reginald's confession revealed his essential decency beneath his bitter quest for recognition. And second, he overestimated his ability to control events. The costume exchange between you and Vincenzo was spontaneous. It disrupted his carefully laid plans. He intended Lucia to kill you, Count, while he arranged for Sir Reginald to be found in compromising circumstances in the archive room. Poirot's expression grew sad. But perhaps his greatest error was his treatment of young Vincenzo. The boy's death was not part of the original plan. It was an improvisation born of panic when Vincenzo's research threatened to expose inconsistencies in Roberto's identity. Poor Vincenzo, the Contessa murmured. He only wanted truth and honesty in the family. Indeed, and it was his innocent desire for truth that ultimately unraveled Tommaso's web of lies. Hastings looked puzzled. But how did you actually catch him? I mean, how did you know to have them all, police ready? Poirot smiled. The button, mon ami. Do you remember the small button I found in the archive room? It was from Roberto's waistcoat, torn off during his struggle with Sir Reginald. But Roberto claimed never to have been in that room. Such a small lie, but it confirmed my suspicions. And the bank records. Once I suspected Roberto, I had the Venetian police investigate his recent transactions. They found evidence of multiple identities, suspicious deposits, connections to several European intelligence services who had been purchasing classified information. The Count shook his head in amazement. To think we trusted him, welcomed him as family. He was very skilled, Count. His assumed grief for his father, his apparent devotion to the family, all perfectly calculated. But evil, however clever, cannot long maintain the appearance of good. There are always cracks, always small betrayals of the true nature beneath. As evening fell, Poirot stood once more on the balcony overlooking the Grand Canal. The carnival season was ending, and Venice was returning to its more quotidian rhythms. Tomorrow, he and Hastings would take the Orient Express back to London, leaving behind this ancient city with its layers of history and secrets. I say, Poirot. Hastings joined him at the railing. Do you think we've uncovered all of the secrets of the Palazzo Morosini? All the deadly ones, mon ami. Some secrets are better left buried, not because they are evil, but because they are simply human. The Count and Contessa will find peace now, I think. And justice has been served. Justice, yes, but at such a cost. Young Vincenzo's life, the destruction of so many illusions. Sometimes I wonder, Hastings, if the price of truth is not too high. But surely you don't regret solving the case? No, mon ami. Justice must be served, whatever the cost. But it saddens me to see how the pursuit of vengeance corrupted Tommaso Ricci's legitimate desire for justice. He became the very evil he sought to punish. As they prepared to leave the balcony, Poirot paused. There is one final irony in this case, Hastings. Tommaso spent 3 years planning the perfect revenge, orchestrating an elaborate masquerade of deception and murder. But in the end, it was the simple truth. A torn button, a forged signature, the authentic grief of innocent people that brought him down. The truth will out, as they say. Indeed, in Venice, city of masks and mysteries, even the most elaborate disguise cannot hide the human heart forever. Good or evil, it will eventually reveal itself. As they walked back into the palazzo for their final night in Venice, the ancient stones seemed to whisper their agreement. The Palazzo Morosini had seen many secrets in its 500 years, many tragedies and triumphs. But it would endure as it always had, keeping faith with the endless human drama that played out within its walls. The masquerade was over. Truth had removed its final mask, the end.